We live in a world obsessed with reinvention. New looks, new brands, new identities. But sometimes the breakthrough isn't in becoming someone else, it's in remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. This is about reconnection, not reinvention. And that reconnection is actually you craving a return to your essence. You know what's funny? I was actually supposed to drop this episode last night. I actually like dropping my episodes on Sundays because, Super Bowl Sundays, football Sundays, it just feels, right to me. But last night I didn't. I was super overwhelmed, drained, and I needed a timeout, honestly. So I took one. And I kind of realized, that was the episode, that pause, that reset. It's actually exactly what I'm talking about today. Because sometimes returning to yourself isn't about doing more, it's about honoring when you need to just stop and breathe and just be for a minute. So, be I did. And here I am, somewhat refreshed and powering on. So, we spoke about healing the inner girl, that inner critic, in episode 3. Now we're going to kind of pivot to reclaiming your identity, reclaiming your power, and just rediscovering or realizing your purpose. This episode is titled No Rebrand Required. I'm Tejahne, and this is Halftime Girl. Now, I can't say that I've ever tried to rebrand myself. Not in the traditional sense, anyway. But I did try to contort myself to fit into someone else's mold. I mean, which, if you think about it, that in itself is an extension of a rebrand. It's shifting and trying to be palatable and promotable or just acceptable in someone else's ecosystem. And I've been working in various roles since I was 15, 16 years old. But I've never really worked harder than when there was an opportunity to move up or be promoted within the company. And now, don't get me wrong, I've always been an extremely hard worker, but I don't know, when there's a chance to just excel or break through a barrier, a little more oomph does get put into everything that you do. And there's been numerous times where I've just had to change how I show up, or be more timid and quiet, or speak softer, or dress more corporate. So I did. Or, there'd be times where, I'd play by the rules and I'd get bumped up a couple notches, and then that was just it, back to waiting in the sea of stagnation again. And I started to take on even more responsibilities, and I made myself smaller and more agreeable, and I bent and I played and played and played by the rules and waited the appropriate time frames they requested, and still they didn't even let me in. And it's, you know, not to say that every single opportunity stiffed me, but the majority, I mean, sure. It was kind of just like it happened so many times that I had a reaction. I had a realization of, it was never about my effort. It was just about their gatekeeping. It was about shrinking myself down to their space, just unable to breathe, boxed in. And to be honest, I got sick of it. It taught me something. I was grinding in a space that was just never made for me. And that was kind of just when I said, screw your playground. You won't let me play. Fine. I'll build my own. And you can do the same. This is how we reclaim our voices in a world that's constantly tried to overtalk us. I want you to just think about one room, one space, or just one role where you've been shrinking yourself. And say it out loud if you can. But that awareness is step one. Now, you know who else reclaimed his voice without ever changing his essence? Good old beast mode Marshawn Lynch. Now, Marshawn could have played the PR game. He could have softened his edges. He could have cleaned up how he spoke, smiled more in interviews, given the press what they wanted. But instead, he chose truth. I mean, let's be honest, this is the man who drank Henny shots before every single game. To this day, I still think that the I'm just here so I won't get fined thing was one of the most realist, badass moments I've ever seen. What the rest of the world saw as stubbornness was actually sovereignty. He wasn't there to do any politicking. He was there to just do the work, honor his craft, and leave the noise behind. And he didn't owe anybody an explanation for how he moved. He still showed up. He gave back to his community. He even handed out turkeys on Thanksgiving. So just ask yourself, where in your life are you just showing up so you won't get fined? And could you, I don't know, somehow flip that into showing up because it's actually true to you? That's what returning to yourself looks like. It's not about being loud. It's about being anchored. And at this stage, when you're healing your inner girl, when you're growing and stretching, it's not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more of who you are, who you've always been. So, let's moonwalk back to your original magic. Music is a universal language that speaks to everyone. It has a way of just transporting us back to moments, moods, and truths that we thought we'd forgotten. I've put together 2 playlists for you, just to enjoy, listen to, but they're songs that celebrate your essence, your energy, and your originality. Create your own playlist. Fill it with the songs that remind you of who you are at your core. The tracks that light you up and bring you back to yourself anytime you need a little reminder. The playlist that I created for this moment is called She Never Left. So that playlist is perfect for any of those types of moments. And for the days where you really need more than a reminder, when you need fuel, there's Reclaim, Rebuild, Rise. It's a playlist for your comebacks, your rebuilds, your victories. But your rise is going to start the moment you decide that you are worth rebuilding. So pause me if you need to, but just pull up your music app and drop at least one song into a playlist called Me Unedited. Yes, right now, that's your homework. Don't worry, I'll wait. Both playlists are linked in the show notes, just waiting for you to press play. So whenever you're ready, give that a go. Sometimes I kind of feel like Steve from Blue's Clues when I tell you to grab your handy dandy journal. But for this episode's journal prompt, answer this question. What did I love before I was told to be practical? What did I love before I was told to be practical? Said it twice in case you really needed to hone in on that. But when you're done writing a little something for that, just list 3 things that you've outgrown that you think used to define you. And then list 3 things you're reclaiming now that feel real, that feel rooted, that feel you. So, 3 things that you've outgrown, but you used to think defined you. And then 3 things that you're reclaiming now that feel rooted, real, and you. And, I've had people tell me how hard it is to even just name one thing that they do for themselves. And it's not because, they don't want to, but because they literally haven't thought about themselves in so long. And, that right there, that's actually the cost of shrinking. That's the cost of bending and performing. Because at the end of the day, you end up forgetting what lights you up. You forget what you love. You forget you. And, if this feels hard, don't beat yourself up. It just means that return to yourself is overdue. So start small. Just pick one little thing that's yours. Maybe it's as simple as a song that makes you smile or makes you move, or a hobby you dropped, or just giving yourself permission to say no. That starts the breadcrumb trail back to yourself. So circle one of the things that you've outgrown but used to think defined you. And right next to it, this doesn't own me anymore. And then say it out loud. Remember, you don't owe anyone a performance, but you do owe yourself the truth. And the moment you stop performing, that's the moment you start living. So why beg for a seat at their table when you can just build the whole damn house? Returning to yourself isn't the finish line. It's just, it's a checkpoint. Because once you remember who you are, the next step is going after the dream that you've been circling. And when that dream is closed, it's supposed to scare you. So, how do you move toward the thing that terrifies you the most? That right there is where we're headed next. If you've been feeling the fear and wondering if you're ready, take this right here as your sign. Trust me, we'll talk about it. As always, the socials, Instagram, Beehive for the email sign up. I started a YouTube. I'm trying out a couple different things. This, as I said before, is going to be a work in progress. As this podcast grows, I grow with it. So I am, working on the YouTube. And as I said before, the website is to be coming soon. So make sure you look out for that. And tune in next week for episode 5 because you won't want to miss it. Till next time, Halftime Girl out.